Good evening. I am now calling to order the Lawrence Alliance for Education Board Meeting for Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. I please ask that you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we get started, I would just like to say that in accordance with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, extending certain measures that were adopted during the COVID-19 state of emergency, we do have some board members who are participating remotely. As such, I will be conducting roll call votes for all members, just to be able to, just to make sure that that all board members' votes are recorded. And we are obviously also here in person at South Lawrence East, where we're open to members of the public to participate and to observe the meeting. We are also live streaming the meeting as we have been as well. Before we get to public comment, I just want to just pause for a second and acknowledge that Dan Rivera, who has served on the LAE since its inception 4 years ago, I believe it is, this will be his last meeting with us. And as you all know, Dan, was mayor here until about a year ago, and he still stayed on the board for a year after that, just to, I think serve the community and represent voices of community members. And so this will be his last meeting, and I wanted to just say that at the front, at the top of the meeting. And Dan, I want to turn it over to you. If you wanted to say a couple of words, no pressure, but I know that, as I've said to members of this board individually and to you, I've appreciated your, just your partnership. I feel like you are someone who really helped me become a better leader when I was just a member of the board and when I stepped into chair. And so I've really appreciated working with you, your collaboration, thought partnership. So just thank you for everything that you've done for the city of Lawrence and for this board, but I'm going to turn it over to you if you wanted to say a few words. And I believe you might be on mute, or we're not getting the sound through. Hang on.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
We got you. Yep.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your kind words. I got to be the mayor of the city of Lawrence. Really the honor of my life. And when I was trying to get the job to be mayor, somebody said to me, "What are you looking forward to the most to do?" And nothing more than being able to support the students of the Lawrence Public School System was at the top of my list. And part of that, being an active guy, trying to stay out of the way so it didn't cause any headaches, was hard to do. But in the end, getting to talk at graduation and, being there for kids, having been one of those kids in those classrooms in some of the darkest hours of the Lawrence Public School System in its history, I really look forward to, and every day that I get a chance to help Lawrence Public School kids, it made my life, and it made me feel like that's what I ran for mayor to do, whether it be, making sure every kid had a laptop or a remote device, had access to Wi-Fi during the beginning of this crisis, whether it was, something, silly like a wrestling mat or uniforms, to ensuring that we, fixed the HVAC in the buildings and did capital improvement projects and stuff that we paid for citizens that we didn't expect the state to do. We just had to do for our own kids. And so, it's bittersweet to have to come off the LAE board. I think that receivership, however abused it may be, I remember the problems we had before receivership. And so I always remind that for folks who would want to hasten the demise of receivership, to think back how unruly and wild it was in those days. Today we have something else that we should be very proud of, and that's in the highest offices of the district, a diversity that reflects the parents and the students of the city. not every city like ours gets that opportunity. And so I'm really excited that all those things are there. And I do look forward to having my some of my nights back with my family. But thank you all so much for your time and having served with the fine folks on the LAE in some of the toughest situations. I do appreciate you as colleagues and friends. No one more than Pat Mariano, who has one of the toughest jobs of going back and forth between the school board and the LAE, and all the rest of the partners. And thank you. And so I look forward to tonight's meeting, and then I'll be submitting my letter of resignation to the commissioner come tomorrow morning.
Thank you. And when things feel or like are in a state where it's safer to gather together, we will do something more appropriate to celebrate you and your contributions. So stay tuned. Okay, I'm gonna continue with the agenda. First or second item is public comment. We have 4 members of the public signed up to speak. We also received 2 letters at the LAE email address ahead of the meeting, which have been provided to all LAE members. So the first speaker is Sunny Sky.
Hello? Okay. Sunny Ski, like your
Ski, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I just have a list of things talking to various educators and parents and community members throughout the district. So they're like not in any particular order. So I'm just going to just read the list. So number 1 is there seems to be no surge plan as evidenced by the huge amount of staff absences and the coverage issues that accompany that. How is in-school learning actually, number 2, how is in-school learning actually happening effectively if on average it seems 13% of teachers have contracted COVID and they are contractually and legally obligated to stay home and self-isolate? Number 3, how is in-school learning happening when we have to confine rooms so students have a teacher, but it acts more as a babysitter? Also, how is this not a cross-contamination issue and a logistical nightmare for the nurses who do the contact tracing? Number 4, speaking of the nurses, were they compensated for coming in on that Sunday, January 2nd and Monday to distribute the COVID tests? Number 5, were teachers compensated for coming in on their off-contract time, or is it just an exploitation of their kind-hearted nature? Some teachers live more than 90 minutes away in one direction, making that almost a half day of travel time. Number 6, there's some curiosity surrounding Baker and the Department of Public Health recommendation that you don't need a PCR test to confirm a rapid at-home test, and whether this will affect our return to work policy. Number 7, so does that mean that saying the at-home testing kits that were just rushed out during this off-contract time do not even count? Number 8, I believe, on Monday the 10th in my building, there were 17 teachers out because of COVID issues and other family-related obligations. So we're just kind of wondering how that's working because it doesn't seem to be fair to anyone. Next number, elementary school here in Leahy, I heard was flooded, 2 classrooms, so they had to work very early in the morning to take care of that. Number 10, I think, in the library here, there's still a leak and mold. We just wanted to throw that out there because we've been speaking about that for years. Number 12, I guess there was 50% of our staff here at Spark. Number 13, it was negative degrees out on Tuesday. Our students are not the wealthiest and don't all have access to appropriate winter gear. And speaking of that, doing some guerrilla math, as I like to call it, there were 80 out of 433 students present. Parents were asking how does this affect their attendance. They know it's an excused absence, but they feel led to believe that it meant it was almost like a freebie. By the way, there's still 3 classrooms in this building, this Academy, that does not have working heat. And then there's multiple classrooms that have overbearing heat and there is no way to cool off, even with windows open in negative degrees. And the last point is we heard that Haverhill is receiving $500 for city officials who are vaccinated from the American Rescue Plan Act. Does Lawrence have any plans to do so? And I lied, there was one more thing. Some teachers who are watching this on the Zoom right now were kind of frustrated that half of the board here is also watching with Zoom while we have to be here daily in person. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Colby Sawyer.
name's Colby Calorie. She just decided to name me after a college.
Okay, that's what it says here, so sorry.
No, I've known her for 6 years.
Okay, okay, thanks for sorry, for the record, just state your name again.
But hi, my name is Colby, and I'm a proud kindergarten teacher here at LPS. I get made fun of constantly by my educational peers for working in Lawrence. They hear of work conditions, treatment by administration, fights, racial injustice, and that's only what is made public by the district. The other things that are discussed often shock them to pure disbelief, whether it be that what we are paid, curriculum decisions, lack of support, or even comments made by families and even administrators. If I left this district, it would be for the benefit of my wallet, honestly. But the joy and the true learning that I see in the lives of the students and their families is way more worth it. I honestly stand here asking you to prove that you care. I invite you into all of our buildings, all of our classrooms. Meet the students and staff that your decisions affect. Meet the students and the curriculum decisions that you are choosing. I was feeling very discouraged when I saw a parent half listening faces that seemed annoyed or uninterested in hearing staff truths, which is just a few of the behaviors that I personally witnessed at the last meeting. I honestly ask you to show that you care. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Mully.
Leahy, 53 Chester Street. Good evening, honorable members. We the citizen, demand of you in this year of the contract negotiation for our teachers, the best contract for our teachers. Our teachers in this collective bargaining need the best support from LAE members. Lawrence Public School, by impeccable leadership by Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Parris, moving forward. We are united to support our great teachers and their union. We cannot allow our paraprofessional employees of Lawrence Public School suffer from injustice of inequality of the pay. The paraprofessionals are the most important foundation for our public school. They must know 83,000 citizens are behind them. We demand fair and excellent compensation to prevent a citywide strike by our paraprofessional employees. Remember, the great leaders such as Nelson Mandela said, the education indeed the most powerful weapon to change the world. This change only possible if we support our teachers and their great union. Lawrence Teachers Union must know we owe our lives to them. We are grateful for Lawrence teachers to work so hard in dark days of this pandemic to build the best future for our children. Remember, Lawrence teachers, and you are our family and member of the family. When you are suffering, our citizens are suffering. In this great new year, our citizens pledge to be best support Lawrence teachers and their union. Message to our great paraprofessional union: when you suffer because of injustice and unfair pay, we suffer with you, we stand with you. We the citizens are disappointed with Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Haley in days of the pandemic doing nothing. We the Laurentians remain united and strong. We demand the best contract for our teachers and their union and the best compensation for our paraprofessionals. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker is Kim Berry.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Barry, and I'm the proud president of the Lawrence Teachers Union, 1,300 strong members. We're made up of teachers, nurses, counselors, related service practitioners, long-term substitutes, and building-based educators. As you are about to vote on the turnaround plan renewal, I remind you that we do not support this plan. We also do not support the timeline that kicks the can down the road into perpetuity. Under receivership, our community is left without a voice. Our elected officials are not afforded the rights to have a say in our school district. Extended days without any authentic enrichment that is touted add stress to our students who aren't real after-school activities, as offered before receivership. not additional core subjects offered multiple times a day with test prep and additional testing throughout the year. We do not agree that measuring students based on MCAS is fair. Resources are lacking in schools as we suffer shortages of staff. Our students need their basic needs met, and we need to prepare them for their lives, not only for tests. Under receivership, our union lost its collective bargaining rights. The evidence is before you today. The condition this district is in today relates directly to the turnaround plan and its correlation to our teachers leaving the district in droves over the past decade. Without a true voice at the table, the decisions that are being made are not in the best for our students. We have officially sent a demand to bargain our contract to the district. We look forward to having an open and honest dialogue. Retaining and attracting career educators must be of the utmost importance. Districts are competing by offering higher wages, better benefits, shorter days, and more. Our students deserve teachers that stay in the district. They deserve consistency and commitment to the city of Lawrence. What's good for teachers is good for students. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to move into the superintendent's report in a second here, but I think I just want to reiterate that I did receive word through the superintendent of the LTU submitting their letter asking to bargain or demanding to bargain, which I'm really excited about, honestly. Like, I'm really excited to be able to, come to the table and, really, we appreciate everything that our teachers, that our staff do, and we know we have many staff members that have worked above and beyond even before the pandemic, but especially during the pandemic. And so, I think this is actually a great opportunity to then come to the table and be able to discuss and hopefully come to what is agreement on a new contract that recognizes and tries to compensate our teachers, as we're doing the same with other bargaining units as well. So just know that, those comments, especially Kim, that you said towards the end, I agree with 100%. Like, let's do this. I'm excited to be able to engage on this. And, more to come. I know the letter was sent this week, but excited to engage in that process. Superintendent, do you want to say anything about that before we go to the agenda?
Yeah, thank you. I echo your sentiments, and we're pleased that the invitation to bargain was met and that we are going to be working collectively to be able to identify dates really, really soon to be able to address these important issues.
Great. Before we get into the superintendent's report, which has a lot of updates, and I want to make sure we get to that, I just want to make a couple of quick announcements as well, just as follow-up to the board, some conversations we've had. The first is just to update you that I have met with Jonathan from the school committee, who, we met primarily to talk about the training that I talked to this board about, I think last meeting and the meeting before. We met also with Glenn Kuchar, who's the executive director of Massachusetts School Committee Association. So together we've identified some topics, and Jonathan's really taking a lead on this, but some topics for the school committee training. And a little bit of context here, I view our role as an LAE, in addition to helping the district meet the goals of the district that are spelled out in the turnaround plan, it's helping to support the elected school committee for the day that they're, called on to really step into direct governance of the district. And so the update is that we have met. There are concrete topics for training. Jonathan, I think the next step is now to sort of think through the timing and what works for his membership, but just wanted to update the board on that, and that, as we continue to talk, it is likely, as I previewed a couple of meetings ago, that I'll want volunteers from this board just to help coordinate and liaise with the school committee. The second thing I'd like to announce is I have it understood from Commissioner Riley that later this week, Mayor DePena will be appointed to serve on the LAE. So I also am excited to have his membership and participation. I think it's really important for the mayor to serve on this board, and also given that the mayor serves as the chair of the elected school committee, I just think it's really important and a good opportunity for the two bodies to work together, which we've said we want to do and we've started, and so I think that's another positive step in that direction. So I'll turn it over to Superintendent for your report, and then, but maybe when I pause for a second, I know I gave two updates. Any quick questions, comments from board members? If not, again, I know we have a lot of good information from the superintendent. All right, Superintendent, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'll start this evening with a timeline that I hope will provide some context for the decision-making that has taken place in the past couple of weeks. In your materials, you'll find a timeline outline that says December 29th through January the 3rd. And what happened on Wednesday, December the 29th, was that the Department of Education indicated that they were going to be supplying districts with rapid test kits that would be made available over the weekend for planning purposes for each district. Lawrence Public received that shipment also of KN95 mask from the Department of Education on that Thursday, December the 30th. And we made sure that those were available to each school leader for deployment to school staff upon return on January the 3rd. On Friday, December the 31st, there were procurement delays on DESE's end, and the delivery of those test kits was delayed. So planning calls with the leadership team and meeting staff were made to adjust for the distribution of those kits. On Saturday, January the 1st, LPS facility went that morning to pick up DESE test kits, and we updated staff members as to the status of our kits. We also learned that instead of having double the amount of the test kits, we were going to be able to have one test kit per staff member. Our facilities and operations then took the task of putting each test kit in a Ziploc bag to ensure that every staff member who was able to come and pick up the test kit was able to do so. On Sunday, January the 2nd, in the morning, rapid tests were distributed at two sites, here at this site and then in the Arlington complex. The sites were staffed by nurses, facilities, and school, all of which were compensated for overtime. On Sunday, January the 2nd, in the afternoon, Human Resources reported a higher than normal staffing absences submitted by staff members who were reporting positive cases. In consultation with the leadership team, Mayor DePena, we then notified families and staff of the school closure the following morning. As you know, school was closed Monday, January the 3rd. We continued to monitor staff absences and made the test available on the following day for staff who were unavailable to pick up that Sunday, understanding that the short time was not enough for staff members to be able to make that drive and or to be at their schools. On Monday, January the 3rd, in the afternoon, in consultations with principals, the LTU Executive Board, DESE representation, our board chair, and central office leadership, we made the decision based on staffing shortages to open schools K through 8. We also noted that the high school had quite a bit of absences and needed additional time to plan for coverage. As a result, we opened on Tuesday, January the 4th, for kindergarten to 8th grade. And that day was dedicated to continuing to provide the high school the support they needed for coverage. Wednesday, January the 5th, all schools were open pre-K through 12th grade. And then, of course, on Friday, we had our first official snow day. In a moment, I'm going to ask Maricel Goris from HR and Melissa Spash to both report on absences of students and then staffing. So whenever you're ready, we'll start with
Summary of the student absences. Basically, from the first date we were coming back in from winter break on January 3rd, which, as the superintendent mentioned, was a no school day, so all grades were home. And it moves through to yesterday, if you look across the top. We listed the percent of students absent and then the number of students absent, and gave a bit of context on the bottom, which is in yellow. So on Monday, all grades were home. On Tuesday, the 4th of January, 42% of students were absent. That was 3,866, keeping in mind that that was only K to 8 that were to be in session that day. On Wednesday and Thursday, we were back to all schools in session, and we had 32% on Wednesday the 5th and 33% absent on Thursday the 6th. Then on Friday, we had a no school day due to snow. And on Monday, January 10th, we had a 26% absenteeism rate with all schools, all grades in session. Yesterday, Tuesday, January 11th, was extremely cold, and the announcements had gone out regarding that we were in session, and that there would be excused absences if students were out due to those reasons. And so that was a 64% absenteeism rate. I'm happy to report that today we went back up to the rates of Monday at 27% absenteeism today.
and I will look at staff absences as well.
So sorry, just another way of saying that is today we had 73% of students in school.
Correct, yep.
So about 3/4 of them in. Okay.
Yes.
That's helpful.
Good evening, members of the LAE Board. I am presenting today on the LPS opening update from Human Resources. Just wanted to start with where we are with vacancies, which would then help you understand the impact of the staff absences towards the end of the report. I provided copies of this PowerPoint for you.
I can't hear. Yeah. I can't hear either. Yeah.
Let's see if we can sort it. First of all, thank you for stopping us and letting us know so we didn't get too far. Appreciate that. Please do that again if you can't hear us. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
I could hear everyone else clearly so far, but this is coming through very muffled.
I'm like, let's try it again.
It's okay, I'm just gonna move my mask so you could hear me better. Okay, so what we're looking at here is where this district is in terms of staffing as of January 2022. We're at 91% of staff fully staffed, which equates to 248 current vacancies. 96% of our teaching positions are filled, which results in 56 current vacancies. 84% of our paraprofessional positions are filled, leaving 71 current vacancies. And our nursing staff is at 82%. And we're currently have 10 vacancies, and that's across registered nurses, LPNs, and CNAs. Can you move to the next slide? So our 56 LPS teaching vacancies, I wanted you to see the breakdown by level. So 34% of those vacancies are at the high school, 41% are in early childhood education programs or elementary schools, and 25% are in middle schools. Reviewing our resignation trends from 2019 to 2021, I reviewed what are for staff who resigned between October 1st of that year to December 31st of that year. So in 2019, we had a total of 55 resignations, 5 being retirements and 11 being terminations. In 2020, that was 36 resignations, 0 retirements, and 10 terminations in that period. And in 2021, our most recent period, we had a total of 103 resignations, 7 of those being retirements and 10 of them being terminations.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify, is that the retirements and terminations numbers are part of that? Because those are not resignations, or those are 3 separate numbers?
The retirements and terminations are counted in the resignations.
I see. Okay, so the 103 includes the 7 and the 10.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So if we just focus on our October to December 2021 resignations, 103 resignations occurred. 45 of those are teachers, 17 are paraprofessionals, and 12 are building-based educators or long-term subs. Of the 45 teachers that resigned, you could take a look at how they're divided across the levels, and you'll see that 29% are high school resignations, 29% are middle school, and 42% are elementary.
And so what were the other, because that doesn't add up to 103. What were the other 29 resignations?
There are not student-facing staff.
Okay, gotcha.
And just real quick, we're going to stop after this presentation, and I'll call on all board members with questions. Okay.
So with our staff attendance rate for January 4th, 5th, 6th, and 10th, and the 11th as of yesterday, we had an average around total staff absence between 11 and 13%. I provided the actual numbers next to the percentage so you can understand the number of bodies that we were talking about. And for those of the absences, I provided which were non-COVID absences. And that ranged anywhere from as low as 41% to as high as 55% yesterday, absences in the district that were non-COVID related. I provided data also of our teaching staff absence. Those are teachers, long-term sub, BBEs, and I included paraprofessionals. These are staff that are facing our students and helping our students attain their education. Of the total absences, on average, it was about 74 to 79% of the daily absences were teaching staff. The next sheet kind of breaks down the percentage of the total amount of that particular work group or union group. So you could see there that on average, 11 to 13% of teachers were absent during that time period. For the paras, it was anywhere from 17 to 20%. For BBEs and LTEs, it was anywhere from 7 to 9%. For the administrators, anywhere from 9 to 14. For cafeteria workers, anywhere from 16 to 21%. Custodians, 6% to 13%. Safety officers, 9% to 23%. And clerks, anywhere from, 12% to 22%.
Great. Can we pause here and take questions? Does that make sense?
I just wanted to add
Oh,
that
sorry.
the percentage of our absenteeism plus the percentage of our resignations and vacancies were the factors of the decisions of why we needed to not open on the first day back. We wouldn't be fully staffed to receive all students.
Great. Thank you. All right. I'm going to go in order just because we have some board members participating remotely. So Jess, if you have comments or questions or clarifying questions, please go ahead.
Yeah, so what's a non-COVID related absence is one of them. Like is there an overarching reason why teachers are otherwise absent? And is one question. And then my second question is, what's the normal sort of range of absenteeism among staff and then also particularly among teachers and paras?
So the non-COVID reasons ranged from bereavement to medical leave to family medical leave, maternity leaves, and other illness not related to COVID.
Okay. And then do we know what percent of our staff are normally absent on any given day?
On the average, it's 3 to 4%, but in this school year, it ranged from 4 to 8%.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You all set, Jess?
Yeah, I'm all set. Right
Okay.
now.
Noemi?
Yes, I have two questions. The first one is, do we know why people are resigning? And then the other one is, considering all the absenteeism, how are we coping in the classroom with the teaching and learning, and also the support for students and the clerks and the staff, how we manage all that, and how the staff that are present are managing all those additional responsibilities?
So because of the student attendance rate, it has not caused undue hardship on the schools to provide the education that the students need for those that are attending classes. Okay.
And then do you know about for the resignation, because it seems that it was large group of people. Did anybody give her feedback regarding why the large number of people were resigning?
So the resignations for teachers at 45 is 3% of the teaching workforce. I'm still reviewing that data, and it is a voluntary form as of now, but it is moving to an online mandatory process for submitting resignation that they provide us with feedback.
Okay, so you're still analyzing the data to understand the reasons why, correct?
Correct. We did that analysis for the past 3 years last spring. I haven't yet looked at the analysis for this time period.
And do you guys have plans for fill those vacancies?
We're consistently hiring and interviewing.
Okay.
We are looking at staff who currently hold bachelor's and master's degrees and could apply for emergency licenses and be hired as teachers.
Okay.
We just also want to make sure that all those that are interviewed and have the qualifications also pass through our screening process through HR, which means, passing of a query and a SORI to ensure that our students are safe and our families are receiving the instructional support that they need.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Pat, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Ventura. Can we go back to the slide with the number of vacancies in the district, please?
Yeah, that's slide number 2.
Now, my question is, how are we covering those classrooms and ensuring that our kids are receiving adequate quality, no, I don't mean adequate, but quality instruction, and they're not losing out because of these vacancies?
It's quite challenging, Pat. I think that the teachers are doing the best they can, given that there's so many staff members at any given point who are out. I can give you some examples of what I've seen across the levels.
I'm sorry, Cynthia, you're muffled. I didn't get the response.
Sorry, I've been saying that it's very challenging for staff members to cover classrooms, and I think they're doing a particularly remarkable work given that there's so many people at any given point absent. And I wanted to share with you some examples in my school visits in the past week and a half. At the preschool level, there were several schools where the classrooms were so small that they were able to combine classrooms. An example was there were 2 preschool classrooms combined. In total, that was 7 students, because in one of the classrooms, both the para and the teacher were absent. And so they were able to then combine the 2 classrooms, but still total, there were only 7 preschoolers in those 2 combined classrooms, as an example. I've also seen where in the upper grades, particularly this week on Tuesday and today, the class still remained small. There have been teachers out of content also covering for their colleagues. So it's a constant reshuffling of the staff between each other, trying to work together and collaborate as we cover for each other, as we continue to do the best we can under these circumstances.
No, I understand that. The vacancies at the high school, again, I believe that was the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
How are we managing the vacancies at the high school where the subjects are, you really can't combine subjects, and the disruption it's causing with different people, monitoring the classrooms? I'm concerned about what they're missing as far as schoolwork because of these shortages. And I understand we're trying the best we can. Does the high school have a particular plan in place where they can ensure that these kids are not missing out?
So as we mentioned, it's nearly, again, a reshuffling of staff members. You've heard repeatedly from public comment where paraprofessionals also have to cover for teachers who are not in buildings. On a normal absent day, the 3 to 4%, and now it's aggravated by this surge that we are experiencing. So it absolutely impacts the high school. And you're right, they cannot combine classrooms because of the subject matter. So at the high school, they use additional staff members, including paraprofessionals and other staff members out of content to be able to deliver instruction for students. It's definitely not perfect or ideal.
I just want to iterate that is 13 teaching positions out of the 250.
All right, thank you.
Maria?
Just a quick clarifying question on the district vacancies. The district total 248 is inclusive of the numbers below, right? As well?
Yes.
Okay. And then
There,
that's number 2, right? The slide number 2. Okay. And then on the attendance rate for January, the last row, it's 79% of those absences were teachers, right? Just for a moment there, I panicked because it sounded
yeah,
like
we're
only
teaching staff.
20.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine. I just want to clarify, make sure that I have that right. Thank you.
Great, but that's important to restate that, let's say January 11th, we had 269 total staff out. Of that number, 79% were teaching staff
Correct.
members. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I also
I
got a
felt
panic
like
on
only
it for a second.
21% staff
Yeah,
here.
right.
That's what it sounded like, so.
Thank you. All right, Dan?
Thanks. I guess my question, I have two types of questions. One is, how is the district absences for students compared to other urban districts? Like Everett and Chelsea, Lowell. I know Boston's kind of a horse of a different color.
Sure. So I've been in close communication with the Merrimack superintendents. That includes Haverhill, Methuen, Dracut, Tewksbury, North Andover, and Lowell. Of course, we're the largest in this Merrimack Valley, and there's no comparison. They are also seeing, however, enormous amount of absences for both staff and students. So it's not unique to us, and it affects us quite differently, but they're also experiencing significant absences both on the staffing and students. I don't have the exact numbers. This is communication that I have informally with the other superintendents.
I think that's a good layer to the data, because I think that I don't want folks to get the idea that this is happening to just the city of Lawrence, and that this is really a national thing that's going on. Do you get the sense, Superintendent, that on top of the retention numbers, we were already kind of on uncertain. I don't know how to really say this. That we were like already kind of walking on thin ice when it came to retaining teachers to begin with before COVID, right? I mean, the funnel for new teachers was every time we used to talk about it was, as we tried to figure out how to diversify the teacher pool, that it was becoming smaller and smaller a pool of folks to pick from.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in general, educators, and then specifically educators that are of color, bilingual, bicultural, are even harder to find under these conditions.
And to keep the staff that you got, right?
Correct.
Again, I just want to put color to this because I think that, surprised that not more people are retiring. Definitely not surprised that the immense pressure we're putting on teachers at this moment makes them want to exit. And so just just focusing as we try to find solutions to this, it's easy to think, this is something that's just happening to us. But hopefully that, we can, as we look to others, as what's happening to them, we can also find some solutions on how other people are dealing with it. Thanks.
Thanks. Julio?
Thank you. I think Dan actually asked a couple of the questions that I had. But is there any way that we can compare the teacher retention rate that we've had in the city prior to us having the turnaround plan?
Oh, so starting, sure.
So if we can compare the retention rate that we had prior to us implementing the turnaround plan versus not having the turnaround plan, which was the norm prior to the commissioner, I guess, implementing the turnaround plan. And also, and I think one of either Jess or Naomi asked about what are the plans in terms of attracting new candidates for teaching. So the superintendent, I don't know if you have a response to my question for that. I'm sure it's something that you'll probably need to dig up to present to us, but I would be very interested in finding out how we were doing prior to that.
Yeah, if the data is available 10 years back, we can certainly come back to you all and share that with you. And it remains a priority for us to continue to recruit candidates. It's part of the plans that we've talked about throughout the years. And as we've mentioned, nobody anticipated this pandemic to continue to be so significant, the impact that it's having on our community and our teaching staff and families. But it will continue to be something that we work on and partner with others.
Do we, I lost my train of thoughts here, but it was pertaining to, again, the turnaround plan in terms of, I understand that this would be going back a little while back, and times were different as well, so I'm very aware of that. But I am hoping to shed some light as to whether it's something that we, even though this turnaround plan is something that we're considering and that we continue to work with, whether it's something that we also need to take another look at, if this is going to detract us from hiring qualified individuals. Have we compared what the turnaround plan in Lawrence, if we compare it to other districts, how does it impact teaching? If we compare it with other districts that might not have the same turnaround plan that we have.
Sure. Are you asking with respect to the academics and the staffing as well? No, we have not done that.
I'm sorry, Julia, are you asking about other districts in receivership or just other districts in general?
Other districts in general, but also we could take a look at other districts in receivership as well. I think it's always important for us to take a look at what others are doing and have been doing in order for us to really be able to say if what we're really implementing is affecting us in a positive or negative way, so that we can continue to provide or attract the best candidates to teach our students. So, Superintendent, again, is it something that we have looked into in terms of other districts or other districts in receivership?
Sorry, we have not done that comparison. I can certainly speak to my colleagues at DESE who have records and better data systems to compare that and see if that's available to us and then share with you all.
I think that might be beneficial for us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have, from a human resource perspective, I have compared the retention rates in our neighboring districts and also the salary rates, the average salary. In order for us to kind of understand where we sit in the Merrimack Valley in comparison to our neighbors.
You have done that?
I do have that as of June of 2020.
Okay, and that would be something that you could share with us?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Can I just make a suggestion? Whenever we have an action item like this, it would be really helpful to note it as such in the minutes, and maybe we could have a standing agenda section from meeting to meeting that's a report back on the action items, because I no blame to anyone. I know that things can get lost in the shuffle. We talk about them here, then people go back to, all the things they have to deal with on the dailiness of the job. But it would be nice to note this so that as the district is preparing for the next LAE meeting, they're reminded that, oh, there were these 5 questions that board members have. Do we have answers or an update on them?
Yeah, I would say that I think what's helpful as well is there's sort of a line of inquiry here, like, questions around comparing retention rates over the years. I heard it to other districts. I heard it to pre-receivership, post-receivership. I think keeping it at the level of like areas that we want to hear more about, like those kind of topics, as opposed to like specific questions. You know what I mean? Because I would imagine for the district it becomes very hard to track down 5 very specific questions. The questions I heard are around comparing retention to our district partners or competitors, and then also sort of overall compared through the years pre and post receivership. So I think to the degree possible, if as a board, like, we can ask for those sorts of just data points and presentations and things as opposed to like specific questions. And I don't think you asked. I heard it as themes, but I guess I just want to, I feel like that's more the kind of presentation and overview that, as a board, we'll want to know, because we want to know that and act on it and share it publicly, as opposed to like individual requests. I feel like if you have a question, call the superintendent. Like, if you have like a one-off question, call her. She'll direct you to her team if she doesn't have the info. But in terms of like the overall sort of themes, patterns, which I was hearing Julia, sort of ask about, I would say that
There were direct questions. They were not themes.
Yeah, but there were questions.
Because I think that will make us better as a board to be able to address the issues that are coming before us, especially when it comes to the loss of staff that we have in the district.
Yeah, agreed. And sorry, I guess what I heard was like, give us a comparison of retention rates over like 10 to 15 years.
That will help us understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether the number of staff that we're losing at this point compares to what we've lost in the past.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, I guess maybe we're just semantics. I'm hearing that as a sort of an overview of data and things, not just like, I want to know what the retention rate was in a specific year. You know what I mean? Like, I heard like in your question, we want to see the patterns, like what's happened, like analyze it, talk to us about it. So, which I think is appropriate for a governance board to ask those kind of questions and want an overview. So we'll want to make sure we note that, as we do in the minutes, and as we're planning for the next meeting as well. I had a couple of quick, a lot of the questions have been answered. And I think, first of all, thank you for this data. It's really helpful to see the data. It's helpful and sobering to see the current number of vacancies. I think also helpful, though, to contextualize it, within sort of other years, other districts. I mean, things like that are always helpful. I would be very interested as you continue to dig into the data on resignations, just that the number this year, and I know it's a very unique context in many ways, October to December of this year, but the resignations are so much higher than the last 2 years, and I'm sure we could even go back and sort of compare it and look at it, that just that additional data that you're looking at in terms of like the why and what people are saying, I think will be really, really important for the board and the district to be able to then create action plans around, based on that data. So just want to reiterate that and thank you for doing that. I think the other question I would have just broadly, and it relates to, we can talk about it, we have the budget process that's kicked off, is, we, by looking at this, I assume that we're going to experience a cost savings then on some of the staffing lines that we had budgeted. And I would love to engage in conversation as part of the budget process of like, what happens with that? I know we incur now additional costs potentially with subs and, additional pay for coverage. And so it's not going to be like, there's going to be, obviously some additional expenses as well. But given that, a lot of these budgets are, fiscal year, and if we don't use it at the end of the fiscal year, like, I don't think we get to keep it. So I'd love to better understand sort of what those figures look like, and it could be next board meeting, we can sort of talk about it. And then based on that, just what our plan is to, if we do have any savings on the salary side, how are we reinvesting that, into our district? So I'd love to be able to, just as part of the budget process, engage in that conversation as well. All right, we're gonna move on, but I think, Jess, you might, I hear you, Jess, and Jess, I'm just gonna ask, I love you, thank you, but I'm gonna ask that, I'm just gonna call on board members, and just note, if you're participating remotely, you can put up a virtual hand, and that'll let me know that you have a question or comment as well. But Jess, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I just had a several more questions about this data and related matters. So one question I have is that I believe that at a previous meeting, we discussed that the severest staffing shortages were at the high school at the beginning of the year. So not like putting aside for a minute the current absenteeism situation, like in absolute terms, has our hiring and has the staffing situation improved at the high school? Do we have more staff people there now than we had at the beginning of the year, or are we pretty much in the same boat?
We have more. We haven't filled
Okay.
all the positions, but we have more.
We have more. And so has the fight situation improved and the sort of general, I know there was a lot of concern about just not enough adults presence and kids skipping class and then the fights and so on. And I have not heard anything about fights. I'm assuming no news is good news over the past month or so, but has that improved?
Significantly, yes.
Okay, and what are we chalking that up to? Is that just is that the presence of more adult staff around? Are we doing restorative justice practices? Is that working out? Like what's affecting that?
So there's quite a few things. In the beginning of a school year, unfortunately, fights are kind of the norm. It's our highest need students voicing the need for support and wraparound services, and that's sometimes how they get identified, unfortunately. I think it got escalated more this year, and it was twice the normal amount of students involved in fights than in normal years, because we were not in person for a year and a half, two grade levels. And so those students were referred to the appropriate programming and support services attached to mentors, and were provided the supports that they needed to be much more successful social and emotionally. We did a lot of things at the high school. We presented 2 months ago about a series of activities that went forward. There's a safety task force that's working on these activities in building more community pride. That jolt of coming from isolation in one's home to being among one of 3,000 students is quite a jump. And so building in activities that promote students to engage with each other on social activities was one of the key feedback from students and also from families and staff. A clearer understanding of the code of conduct and the code of discipline, and how how we follow consequences are delivered, what's the process, and those meetings were held with families so they could really understand that. We hired a Center for Restorative Justice, a manager for the Center for Restorative Justice. That center is up and running, and they are engaged, and they're hired, I think, 3 out of the 4 individuals for restorative justice specialists in order to support students who are either having some conflict with one another or having some challenges with working together cooperatively and having empathy for one another by forming some circles. Students have been targeted to participate in some group work. Attendance of teaching staff had improved significantly after the election. That helped kind of simmer down and for students to have a consistency with their teaching staff. to attend class and not be out of class. So there's a different feel when you walk on the campus. It's much calmer, more cohesive, and the task force meetings have been happening every, I think it's 2 to 3 weeks, one night a week in the evenings at the guidance suite on campus, and folks can join. So they've had a consistent group meeting, as well as putting together a voluntary task force that will help with a rollout of IDs and uniforms and T-shirts that have been purchased for students that didn't have access to uniforms because of manufacturing delays.
Well, that's encouraging, I would say.
Very much.
Okay, a couple of more questions just about the current situation with the absenteeism among both students and staff. So I guess given that some kids are coming to school right now, right? And some kids are getting sick and staying home, or in some cases, I guess, staying home because of the extreme cold on a couple of days. And there's quite a few less kids in the classroom. Like, what's the plan for syncing learning when this kind of normalizes again? And I mean, assuming we all toss around that word normal to like it's actually going to happen. I don't know that it will happen, but I'm assuming that this surge is going to fade at least somewhat, and maybe we'll follow the pattern of last year at least a little bit. And I guess related to that, like, given that I know that DESE won't let us go to remote learning, right? So, which is what it is for now. But it seems like there needs to be a lot more support for teachers and for students, given the fact that we can almost guarantee over the next couple of weeks, there's going to be a lot of students absent, and there's going to be teachers absent as well, right? And I'll just speak from my personal experience. Like my son's whole class had to be quarantined for several days. And I know that teachers are dealing with quite a bit right now, but there really wasn't much that went up on Google Classroom. There were some assignments that went up, but it's really hard as a working parent, to have to stay home, to monitor his academic experience, to not have things that they're doing. And I don't think that my experience is unique or that's unique to the school my son is in. So, this is like our second year of being in it. Like, what's the plan around that, around having, if I know we can't deliver remote learning with the teacher teaching remotely, but we need to at least have materials and things that are available for kids to be doing. I know not all of them will do it, but some of them will. And how are we kind of supporting teachers in getting that together, right? So that we have this reservoir of stuff that can be posted and projects that can be done and students can be engaged, because I'm just frankly concerned about, like how much everyone is falling behind with all of this. And that's not happening equally across the Commonwealth, even though I know that there's definitely other districts suffering from this, but it seems like we need to be able to have some resources available for that.
Yeah, I can try to answer that, because I think the initial plan was that we had agreed that teachers, when students would be in quarantine, that teachers would provide access to the materials. And I think what we didn't plan for was this second surge where also teachers are sick and unable to be able to do that. And then the question is, how do we support that? Really difficult, because now we're relying on the administrators and or their colleagues to support those teachers who are sick themselves. And so I think it is bumpy in that way. I agree with you. I think that they are doing the best that they can given the circumstances. It's quite abrupt in many instances. There's a pool, there's people who then are positive, they get the call, and the very afternoon, everybody has to go home. So the teacher had not planned for that. The teacher had planned for in-person learning, and now everything reverted. That teacher themselves might be sick, and the administrators and the colleagues are doing the best they can to support that classroom as quickly as possible. So there will be lags. There will be some bumpiness in that particular week, and I can assure you that they're all working really hard to catch up as quickly as possible when they get back into those classrooms. And so we ask for, I think a little bit of grace and patience from families and our other colleagues as teachers and administrators help each other recover and rebound each and every single time they have to be quarantined because either a student or a staff member is sick with COVID.
Yeah, I hear you. I guess what I would say is that partly because we have no guarantee that this is not going to happen again this year in this next year in the brave new world we're in. Like we need to spend some time this summer or whenever the planning is happening for the next school year, kind of thinking about what these contingencies are. And I think DESE needs to be thinking about that too, and how they can support that process and understanding that learning is getting interrupted and there needs to be at least some mitigation strategies in effect. And I guess I had just one more question that's really more of a process question. I'm just, I guess y'all can tell me to back off if this is not really, like, if this is micromanaging or not the board's place, but I'm wondering, like, I know that when all of these things are happening and we're like adjusting and adapting on the fly, that there's planning that's going on with principals to kind of game plan how we're going to deal with it. Are we going to open or not? And how we're going to staff it and how we're going to manage all of that. And I'm just wondering, like, if and how teachers are getting included in that discussion and decision making.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, we did consult with the executive board, the LTU executive board. So the assumption is that they're speaking on behalf of the teachers. And to be fair, it's very, very difficult decision-making process, and we include as many voices as possible given the short, decision-making process. But yes, that's our best go-to, which is to include the executive board.
Thank you.
Cynthia, do you want
to
to
add something, or Melissa?
I wanted to see if it's worth saying a few things about Acceleration Academy that's being planned right now as something that we hope will be a way to accelerate some of the lost learning for folks, and also just keep kids who would benefit from some continued time in class during that first week or the third week of February. We are planning a robust program with like 2,500 students. We've expanded that to include K-2, which in the past hasn't been a bigger part of that program. So we added grade 9, a full 9 classes there. So we're definitely trying to use that week for some intensive, very small group instruction to work on lost learning. A week doesn't cover it all. Many of the other suggestions are great, but I wanted to add that as a component to the increased efforts we're going to put in place during that week.
Great, thank you. Dan and then Noemi.
Thank you so much. Really excited to hear about that. It's the Acceleration Academies. That's a big deal. The more you can be able to do in there, I think that's going to have some good impact. Growing that, if you can, at all costs, would be great. I just want to make another, raise my voice to support what Jessica was talking about with the packets. I know that the current, way we do teaching and learning is earned autonomy, and with autonomy comes this, ability that folks are doing different things in different buildings. But I think that there has to be some centralization around if kid A is absent, COVID or not COVID, or has to say that a packet with X amount of work is presented to the family regardless of whether or not, to Jessica's point, that the child ends up doing it, I think it's just an opportunity to keep the student engaged, and do that the best they can. Now that means you got to have copy paper available. That means you got to have copying available. It means those types of support available for teachers to get those packets together. But when and for those, and then you could probably find the best practices that are going on in the districts. I'm sure the teachers are already doing that. But I would encourage you to move off on this one point about packets going home to kids who aren't in classes, to come off our autonomy on that piece, to really make sure that everyone in every building, in every classroom, every kid has that, because you just don't know what is being missed. And then later on when we try to account for it, sometimes the kids are home with their parents, so maybe the parents can engage more than they used to. But it would be a missed opportunity not to centralize that and make sure that every kid who is out gets the packet, for their grade and for where they're at in the curriculum.
Thanks, Dan. Noemi?
Yes, I want to go back to what Jessica was saying regarding the teachers' involvement. And I agree with her, this is not about micromanaging, but sometimes, we as board members, we do get emails from teachers that or sometimes staff that they might say, I have or have not been involved. And I also understand from the perspective of the school district that some decisions have to be expedited and they might not be able to include as many people as possible. But in the process, it would be good for us to be presented with what efforts have been made to reach out to as many teachers as possible to be involved in some of the key decisions that where teachers should be involved. So I think that when a specific task is presented, give us an idea of how many teachers were involved and from how many schools, because again, it will help us to respond to some of the demands and requests that some of the teachers ask us when they email us. So I think that would be a good way to also keep the line of communication open and keep a trust through the system.
Great, thanks, Naomi. All right, thank you very much for the information. I'm going to move us on to the next agenda item. Sorry, did you want to talk about her? Okay, so the next agenda item is the turnaround plan, and I am looking for a vote here. I know we discussed this both in the committee and at the board meeting last week. So I will go through and call on people. I will start at the top here. I will entertain a motion, and obviously we'll have a discussion, but if anyone is ready to put a motion forward, I'll entertain it at this time.
Mr. Chair, I move that I'll make a motion to accept the turnaround plan as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I am going to pause and open it up to discussion. I'll go through and we'll go the alphabet now the other way, just to see if there are any questions or thoughts, and then we'll go from there. So, Julia?
No questions.
Okay, Dan?
I would just say that I think the question about getting out of receivership always comes out. And I want to make sure that I say this in as delicate as possible. Not having a turnaround plan is the way to not get out of receivership. And so, however perfect or imperfect you may think the plan is, the ability to go in and change it later on and suggest it and take votes basically at the board level, things are going right or things are going wrong. That interaction is, I think, going to be very helpful. I say this kind of as I'm walking out the door, but I always felt like I was part of those discussions of trying to change what we were doing and encouraging the staff to do that, encouraging Desi to support that. But I would just encourage us to this evening pass this, because nothing would signal more to Desi that things are on the right track here than us, approving a turnaround plan. Thanks.
Okay, Maria?
My only comment would be just a reminder of our previous conversation that, going forward, presentations on specific work or projects that are happening are linked to the goals that we are approving or
Sweetie, can you speak more into the microphone?
Oh.
Sorry,
No,
it's hard to
that's okay.
hear.
Let's move it to your right so when you're looking at Ventura.
I was just reminding them of, it was just a reminder of our previous conversation, just that linking future presentations on different initiatives to these goals and to this specific plan, to make sure that we're on track and that obviously all the initiatives or everything that we're doing budget-wise and effort-wise is linked to this work.
Great, thank you. Pat?
Yes, in reading the turnaround plan, it was clear to me that a definite roadmap was established with targets and timelines in order for us to exit or meet the requirements to exit receivership. I think it's important, as Dan said, for DESE to realize that we're serious about what we're doing, and this is the plan that we're going to follow. Sure, we might have, there might be some adjustments needed as we go along, but as we, in looking at it right now, it's a clear path. And I think it's incumbent upon us as a board to approve this plan and move forward.
Thank you. Noemi?
I don't have any comments at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Jess?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the thing I said last time about, and echo what some other board members have said, in that we need to make sure, as Maria said, that we're linking like the future presentations and information that we get to the benchmarks in this plan and how it's helping us meet them. And I want to feel like we have very clear reporting points at which we're saying, okay, tonight we're revisiting the benchmarks in the turnaround plan and reporting on the progress and outcomes that we've made in relation to that. And I would like to see that information not just be presented to this board and clearly to the school committee as well, but also like communicated to the district in general as well, so that people understand where we are in relation to this. And it doesn't feel like we're stuck in this murky, when will we ever get out of, receivership land?
Great, thank you. And then I guess my comments, I echo a lot of what people have already said. I'd say just a couple quick things is that this is the plan that we chose to renew. So it's, a lot of the same strategies that the district has been operating under, but with updated, in some ways, updated work, updated programs. So just making sure that, we approve this. And when I said this last time, or last meeting rather, is in my mind, and I want to say it again publicly, like in my mind, I view the role of this board in really overseeing the implementation of the turnaround plan. So we're accountable to the goals that are in this plan. And, for folks who are following along at home or seeing the plan, it's really what I look at as Appendix B, which is the measurable annual goals. Like this plan has clear goals around things like student attendance, dismissal rates, exclusion rates, student safety, student promotion, dropout rates, graduation rates, student achievement on MCAS. It talks about acquisition of 21st century skill, parent and faculty engagement, culture and academic success. So there are a lot of things that are in here that we're accountable to helping to achieve. And the other thing I want to say publicly is, I view that our job as an LAE is to support the district, hold them accountable, push them to achieve this. I agree wholeheartedly with, I think Jess made the comment last meeting, Maria reiterated it this week, around ensuring that we have a calendar of reporting back to the board and publicly on those different data points. Like we know what the end year result goals are for attendance, for example. How do we sort of, quarterly or however we sketch it out, like we need to be able to get updates on those things and then know what we're doing differently, sort of in real time or, to make changes. And so I was going to say one more thing and now I can't remember, but so I agree with those comments. And like I said earlier, at the top of the meeting, you know, I also see our role as working to support the school committee, you know? So again, I see all these things together. Like the turnaround plan is the current path for the district. Our job is to make sure we support the superintendent and the district to knock it out of the park so those goals are met, which then tells us that students are on a better track. And then our job is also to support the school committee to make sure that, again, they're ready to take, you know, oversight of the governance of the district when that time comes. And so appreciate everyone's comments and hard work. And the only recommendation I'll make later after the vote is if we can get the turnaround plan subcommittee back together to maybe help to sort of map out what that reporting structure could look like, I think that'd be a real concrete ask that we can ask of that group and then bring it back to the board to work on. So, all right, so I'm going to close discussion at this point, and given that some of us are remote, I'll do a roll call vote. So the motion that has been seconded is to approve the turnaround plan that was in our packet. So Jess?
Sorry, was on mute. Yes.
Noemi?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Maria?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Julia?
Abstain.
And the chair votes yes. So it is approved. Thank you. All right, the next item, teaching and learning update. A couple of items under there. Superintendent, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. So in a moment, we're going to give you an overview of where we are in our literacy plan. That also is part of the turnaround plan. And moving forward, we will flag it where on that plan is. And also just an update on the anti-racist work. So go ahead, Melissa.
Thank you. So this is intended to be sort of a process update on where we are with the developing our district-wide literacy plan. This group first came together before my own place in this role about a year ago, and we've been moving forward more from last spring and into this fall. And it's been a very demanding time, but we've definitely been meeting with regularity. We convened what we're calling a strategic literacy workforce team. It's really nicely represented across the different grade levels. So we have early childhood folks, elementary, middle, and high school. As you can imagine, the literacy demands are very different at those levels. Our team is comprised of principals, coaches, teachers, and central office staff. And recently, we've had an expert from DESE joining us as well as a consultant. This is the goal that the team established, which is to develop a cohesive and comprehensive literacy plan for LPS that will honor school autonomy, yet provide research-based guidance and minimum agreements for literacy instruction for all grade bands. I did put a little footnote at the bottom that this is actually in the turnaround plan on page 7 as a noted item to follow up on, and so this is kind of our launch of that. Next slide. Here's where we are right now. This was a pretty monumental effort. We created an inventory of curriculum and assessments by school, K to 5. We started there intentionally with the idea of moving on to the high school after, although we do have a high school member on the team who is very involved and kind of added his pieces in there too, so we're well underway on the high school side. This is something like looking at every intervention curriculum, every regular curriculum for core, what assessments are being used. As you can imagine, we have a lot of schools, and that's a lot of different items in the inventory. We also held focus groups with principals and leaders around professional development, which was very insightful and started to help us to understand where we want to head with professional development as a recommendation. We outlined district strengths and areas for improvement around curriculum, assessment, intervention, and professional development. Those were kind of the 4 categories of our subgroups. And we're in the process now. What that basically said to us when we started to look at what we found in this inventory and these focus groups was the need for a cohesive vision for literacy at the district level. That was something our teams in the schools were asking for, and that's what we're working on now. So we wrote a draft literacy statement, and now we're going into what's called an instructional vision. It's very granular, very detailed, and we hope to be able to share that with principals and other stakeholders soon, and then with this team. Those are our next steps, developing short and long-term goals to enact the literacy vision that we're putting into place, integrating it into school planning recommendations. School planning is around the corner, so we plan to bring some recommendations that would represent the thinking of all the schools and all the grade bands to the school planning board team. And then engaging the stakeholders. It's incredibly important that everyone has a say in this and that people feel invested in the recommendations that we make. So I started this by saying it's sort of a process overview. I'm not getting you deep in the details of what's there, but just to understand there's a very collaborative process in place with a lot of experts in the room, and we're looking forward to having something to show to you all soon.
Thank you. What I would recommend is we do the second sub-bullet as well, and then we can ask questions on both. Thanks for the update, though.
David, are you going to load the next presentation? Thanks. Terrific. So this is an update from the Anti-Racism Committee, of which I am a part. And we have a lot of, again, progress update to provide to you with the anticipation of some reporting out from our equity audit in the spring. For this overview, we're going to talk a little bit about expanded membership of our team, some of how we're funding the work that we're doing, the equity audit that is well underway. It started in November and it will end in the end of January. And then a little bit about the professional development that members of our team are participating in this year. Here's our membership. We expanded it in October to add 4 educators. We worked with the union to help identify those members, and they've been incredibly valuable to the team. So we have 1 from each grade band, and we also added a parent member from Tuvos Council, who's been very instrumental in helping us think about how we link to family voice here. You can see we also have 2 community members, Jonathan Guzman, who's also a school committee member for District F, and Marquise Victor, who's a founder of Elevated Thought, an organization in town. And we have school administrators as well as several members from central office. Most of our funding comes from the Nellie Mae Foundation. It's a private grant. We were awarded $250,000 with a timeline ending this June. We are seeking to extend that. We have a request in just because it's been a very complicated year and we'd like a little bit more time, and because our equity audit is underway and will wrap up, like I said, in later winter. The budget from Nellie Mae includes money, stipend and money for participation on this group, also for the equity audit, which we commissioned an outside partner to do, and then other items like a school-wide book read, professional development, and a youth summit. These are items that we are going to plan once we get this equity audit, because that should inform our strategies. Next slide, please. The equity audit, we hired Blackprint Educational Consulting out of a bid process to conduct what's called an equity audit. They started in the fall, November 8th to be specific. They're going to end their last school visit on January 21st. The scope of that work includes stakeholder engagement through town halls. Those town halls started out with educators. We're now moving on to include one for paraprofessionals, as well as another for families. And we expect to receive a report from Blackprint with their findings later in the spring. The town halls, those are a gathering of stakeholders. They're confidential to gather input from families and educators. We had 2 in November, and we're having 2 more in January and February. We're just starting to launch some publicity for those events now. These are also hosted by Blackprint, and they're confidential. We don't have members of our staff there, and they're kept anonymous. We also have school visits as part of this. This is a very comprehensive effort. They're going to every single one of our schools, November 8th through January 21st. Usually those visits are 3 to 6 hours, depending on how many grades. You can imagine a school that has K to 8 would have longer time than a school that had just a few grades. The visit includes an observation of the classroom as well as facilities, a principal interview for 75 minutes, and then for middle and high schools, we have focus groups, about 8 to 10 students who participate in those focus groups, and of course those have parent permissions. What are we going to do when we receive this equity audit later on? This is what's written kind of into the scope, and so I shared it here. We're going to determine the degree to which each school and central office department prefers an anti-racist agenda. So we'll have some actual data from these visits and from the town halls to look at and reflect upon and plan around. We'll identify which schools and departments would benefit from additional explicit training, support, and resources. And then we're going to use the data to inform the types of assistance that all the departments and different schools will receive. Lastly, there's actually 2 more slides. This one is just talking about the professional development that we're doing. This is through DESE. It happens to be black print as well. But it's a multi-tiered system for success. It's essentially PD, a lot of PD. I'd say over 20 hours of PD over the course of the year, as well as district planning sessions with this core team. The membership all attends these meetings, and it's been very robust right now. We've done a few of them, and so far it's been very good. And then lastly, our team meets monthly if we don't have one of those other meetings, and we're working on a book list and a library that we can lend out so that eventually we can pull those book groups together and get into conversations with the community, with students, with our staff. So this is an overview to let you know the work that's being done, and I anticipate we'll be receiving some feedback soon that we can also share and plan around.
Great, thank you so much. So I'll do a round of questions. Board members, and again, feel free to ask questions around the literacy plan or the anti-racist work update. I'm going to start with Noemi. I just saw Justice camera off, so just unless...
Thank you for the presentation. This is very impressive work. And my question is related to the previous presentation about absenteeism and the limited staff and teachers. How do you think you're able to successfully implement this work when absenteeism is so high and teachers and staff is overstretched already?
I'll take that, Melissa. I think we're just right now in the stages of both planning for the literacy plan and doing the audit, the equity audit. So in earnest, all of this work will start in the following school year. And right now we're at the gathering, analysis, and planning stages of both the literacy plan and the anti-racist work. We're doing pockets of where there's doing some PD, but this is a multi-year work also. This is not a one year initiative.
And considering, again, that this is in the planning stage, how many teachers are involved in the process or staff are involved in the process?
Sure, so for the literacy plan, there's a committee that is outlining that. And as Melissa mentioned, I think that group is pretty big, 15 people maybe?
About 15, and it's a wide range, mostly coaches, which many of whom are in the teachers union, as well as some administrators, so many stakeholders.
Okay.
And then on the anti-racism committee, there's 4 teachers, 3 community members, numerous administrators, and central office staff. But I think as Cynthia said, it's a planning time and kind of organizing for launch this summer, this fall, and next fall.
Okay, thank you.
Jess, I'm going to come back to you.
Yeah, I'm just glad this work is happening, and I don't have further questions right now. Thank you.
Pat?
Yes, I just have one quick question. As far as the literacy plan goes, it says develop a district literacy vision statement, instructional vision for literacy. You haven't developed that yet, correct?
I should have written draft. We did draft one, and we need to bring it to principals and other stakeholders for their feedback before it would be something that we could share more widely, but I should have written draft there. Good catch, Pat.
Okay. All right, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Yeah, Pat, I'm just going to add this subject of autonomy, which Dan Rivera mentioned earlier. One of the things that we're going to continue to talk about, and something that you all have asked, is how do you continue to be an autonomous district and also share very specific visions and implement that? So this group is tasked to do that, and this is why it's going to take multi-year in order to be very, very thoughtful about creating a vision and then adopting that vision within the autonomies that each school enjoys.
Thank you.
Maria?
So I just have a couple of maybe comments. Regarding the literacy plan, I just, you may already be including this, but it would be a missed opportunity to not include other community organizations in this literacy effort. I think, obviously, all the children, I'm speaking on behalf of not only early education programs, but also after-school programs, but also the library. I think there's a lot of stakeholders here that in the community, which our community does have a lot of resources around this. If we have a more coordinated effort, it could lead to, just better results. And it would be a beautiful thing to have a citywide effort around literacy versus a district-only effort. So I would encourage us to partner with, again, we have so many strong organizations, and I will add too, from personal knowledge, that the early childhood community right now is is collaborating at a very high level, more than ever, because we are also trying to survive these times. And I suspect we're working on some parallel efforts, and we should consider literacy being always our priority as well. So it'd be great to have a conversation about that with those organizations, and also include the library too. We have a great library in the city. I mean, it has come a long way since, for the last number of years. So I would love to include city resources into this effort, because they're all our children.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. I think it's something I'll bring directly back in our meeting next week. And I actually do have a meeting upcoming or being planned with the library. So I'll be sure this is on the agenda.
That's great. And you mentioned professional development. I mean, how can we include people that are working with the same students at different times? With some of our after-school teachers at the YMCA, YW, Community Day, any of the organizations that work with our children after school or during summer camps. And it'd be great to figure out where are those kids in the summer so they can continue reading those books that you are going to identify.
Thank you.
And have them available for families in the library. That's a very, general example. And then with regards to the anti-racist work, thank you for the presentation and for doing that. I know it's a grant, so it seems to be more focused on students, right? And anti-racist work that impacts students directly. Do we have, or have we worked, I may be late to this question, but have we worked on anti-racist work that impacts staff at the district level too, in terms of feedback, not directed to student impact, but to staff impact?
Yeah, so just to be clear, the anti-racist work is for all community members of LPS, right? It'll start with staff and practices that we have. And of course, that's going to be impacting student experience and outcomes for students.
Perfect. Obviously, thank you. That's great, because I do personally believe that that's where it will start. Obviously, when teachers are feeling the impact of that, it will be transferred to the students. So thank you. Good.
Great, thank you. Julio?
I actually don't have any questions. Thank you, Melissa. This is a very comprehensive plan, and I look forward to hearing more about the development of these schematics that you have in place right now. So looking forward to your report.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I just want to echo, thanks for just the status, sort of pulse check on where things are. I would love to hear more as the work continues on the literacy plan, the inventory of curriculum and assessment by school. So I know that the group is developing a draft, or has a draft, and we'll be workshopping a vision statement. And, I know that schools have autonomy over, sort of implementation. And I know we have a responsibility as a district to ensure that curricula and assessments, but especially curricula, are evidence-based and ones that we think are really going to help, improve literacy for students. So as part of the update that you provide us moving forward, I'd love to just better understand what that inventory showed you all, how you feel about the curricula, that you've seen across the districts being used, and just what opportunities you see for collaboration across the district. I'm sure a lot is happening already, but are there opportunities to strengthen? Are there ways that we as a district can incentivize schools to change direction if needed, or if we feel like we have an opinion on other materials or curricula that could be even more effective? So, and I know that's all an ongoing conversation with teachers and with principals and with staff, but that one in particular, I think, is one where I just love to hear more about in terms of the resources and what's available to ensure that, while people have autonomy, I think we have some clear sort of lines in the sand that, that we want to make sure all of our staff are using and have access to just evidence-based, high-quality curricular products.
Yeah, two responses to that. One is that the outcome of this is really intended to be structured to kind of explain the strengths and the gaps that are in that area. And this kind of ties to the SQR, the School Quality Review presentation that Cynthia provided a few months back. There's a specific indicator there for curriculum. And so that's been a great incentive for folks to ensure they go through the process of ensuring they have a strong curriculum. The story's pretty good there for the K-5 on the ELA side.
Yeah, and I'll add that this is part of the earned autonomy framework, so that's something that we can also adjust.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up the SQR, because I think this does also, and I don't have the data in front of me, but I know one of the areas that the SQR pointed out is just this need for like a stronger shared vision for maybe, not just literacy, it seemed like, sort of teaching and learning. And so this is in that vein, like, making sure that there's a clear, shared, understood, vision for literacy instruction. That you're right, and thanks for bringing that up, that we can see in the SQR as one of the data points as well. So thank you for that. All right, appreciate it. And then we'll move to the penultimate item here, budget process.
Great, so in a moment, I'd like to share with you part of the budget process that will in earnest commence later this spring is some of the funding sources. There's been a lot of anticipation and curiosity, and I think a little bit of confusion about some of our funding sources, in particular the ESSER. So we thought it would be good for us to preview it now and then continue to have really good conversations about the current funding sources. Oh, is that our first one? I think it might be. Yep, thank you. Okay, so here is the big pie. As you can see, nearly 70% of our funding is what we call general fund, foundation funding. And then we have the entitlements, which are title grants, and everybody is quite familiar with Title II. That's always the big one. Title III, also for multilingual learners, and so on. And then, of course, the newest pot of money is the ESSERs. One, we're currently in ESSER 2, and then upcoming is ESSER 3. So I'm going to start unpacking those. Just a quick reminder about what the foundation money is, and we talk about this during each budget process. The current local contribution that we have is of 5%. As a reminder, Chapter 70 is 95%, and we are the district that receives the largest state aid in the Commonwealth. We've talked about this in each budget process, which is net school spending. And then, of course, we also have infused in the Chapter 70 the Student Opportunity Act. As a reminder, we had a comprehensive plan of the Student Opportunity Act that includes quite a few FTEs in the form of social emotional supports for our students. And those are things like social workers, BCBAs, and other personnel. That's just a snapshot of what the current allocation is, and we're definitely going to be talking about this point by point when we start more formally the budget process. But I do want to get into the ESSERs, because I think that's the one that's kind of hanging. And just to give you a snapshot also of what the budget has been. The other question that comes up quite a bit in conversations is this issue of like, well, how much money do you have and how much has it increased throughout the years. So you see here a 5-year snapshot. And the average, and Maciel will correct me in a moment, but we get about between 2 and 3% is the average. In fiscal year 20, the 7.1 that you see there is an anomaly because they corrected the formula for enrollment. I think that's right. And so we ended up getting this bigger bump. But you can see that in 17 it was minus, and then that 2%, and this past year 3.8. And so that's the average that you see in the 5-year. So it is everything from minus to as high as 7.1. And again, the foundation formula is where we have the bulk of salaries and benefits. That's the big pie, is the 80%. The entitlements. The entitlements that we're familiar with are everything that we add to support the teaching and learning. And here are the 4 big ones. Title II is the one that we talk about quite a bit. There's a lot of intervention work doing there. You hear us talk about summer work. You hear us talk about acceleration academies. Those are all supported by the titles. Yep, keep it coming with the titles. That's just those are just the allowables and non-allowables of the titles, which is supplanting versus supplementing. Our school leaders and some of our teachers know this language really well because we're very tempted also to do some supplanting. And so the best example that I can give about supplement versus supplant is you're not allowed to do supplanting. So an example of supplanting would be using title funds like Title II for a math curriculum. Chapter 70, and they expect that we're all going to have a math curriculum. I can't use Title II fundings or any of the entitlements to say, I'm just going to go ahead and buy math curriculums with title. No. Chapter 70 funding gets you the math curriculum. If you want to add enrichments of math, then you can use the entitlements, all the other grants. Here we go. Here are the ESSERs. So I spoke to the principals about this, and as we start the school planning process, they're going to be able to share this with their teacher leadership teams. And that is, what are the funding sources? What are the big buckets? And what can we are allowed to spend some of this additional funding on? And what are the things that not so much? Here's some allowables, so I'll let you take a moment to look at that. And some of the basics that you already would expect. Of course, academic instruction, and those again are things to address unfinished learning. And of course, social emotionals and operationals related to this pandemic. An example of the social emotional supports is we can do FTEs, short-term FTEs. The ESSER funding is funding that expires in 3 years' time. So one example is we have given every single school an additional BCBA with the understanding that those BCBAs will not be available to them in 3 years' time when this pot of money runs out. It's a tricky thing to do when you add FTEs on money that is one-time money because nobody wants to give up their BCBAs in 3 years' time. The other thing we added as FTEs is additional supports in the form of interventionist. And also, if you remember, when we were in the remote part of this pandemic, every school got a technology liaison that was also funded via the ESSERs. Again, we're quite careful not to put FTEs on ESSER because then they will not exist in 3 years' time. Things that are not allowable on the ESSERs, things like bonuses, merit pays, everything related to wages. However, as it relates to wages, we can do things like stipends. We can do things like incentives. Those are quite allowable because, again, they're one-time funding. So if I want to say that the custodians are going to get a one-time retention bonus of $50, that's permissible. What I cannot do is embed it in their wages and their salaries because in 3 years' time, you don't have that money. We don't have that money. And then you can see other things that are unallowable. The list is quite long, but this is just a highlight of things that are not allowable. And just this is a reminder of when we did the stakeholder survey, and what the stakeholders across our community wanted us to see this investment, this resources invested in. And those are the three top ones. You'll see it in the next slide highlighted, and the reminder of like when we said, here's the additional funding, how should we spend that? Here is how it is attached to the goals and the priorities. So in the next slide, you'll see that. Here they are. No surprises here. We all agreed that it should continue to be focused on student-facing supports and social emotional supports. Again, this is just unpacking that stakeholder response that we did in last fall. I've already forgotten how long ago that was, but it was quite the process. We then submitted that to the Department of Education, and they get to respond to us in terms of, yes, that is appropriate use of this funding. No, go back to the drawing board. We did share this with you all. We received a favorable vote, and then we submitted it to the Department of Education.
Great, thank you. I'll do a roll call going the other way in the alphabet. So Julia, and if there are any questions or comments?
No, thank you. Thank you, Superintendent. I think it's a very explicit and necessary information for when we begin this budget process. Thank you.
Thanks. Maria?
So I know this is it's for a limited time, the 3 years that you mentioned, but are we establishing some measures in terms of, what we accomplished with this money within these 3 priorities that you identified? And could we hear, so we can get reports regularly throughout, the next 3 years in terms of what are we doing? It is a significant amount of money, so it'd be great to make sure that we get some results and that we keep measuring that.
Yeah, absolutely. And during the budget process, we'll revisit what we have done so far with ESSER 1 and 2 and what has already been accomplished and where we are with ESSER, I'm calling it 2.5 and then 3, ESSER 3. Yes, absolutely. In addition, we have to submit very detailed reports to the state on the use of this funding.
And when will we hear from DESE? I forget. Will they get back to us approving?
I hope so very soon, because we'd like to, commence that planning for ESSER 3 as well.
Can you just be a little more explicit on that last point? So we submitted a plan to DESE for ESSER 3?
Correct.
And we're waiting to hear approval of that from DESE?
That is correct.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Maria, any other questions?
I'm
Okay,
good, thank
great.
you.
Pat?
Sorry, I stand corrected. I'm being told that we did receive, Maciel, jump in, that we did receive.
Sure.
Go ahead,
we
Maciel.
did receive approval on our plan for ESSER 3. The only thing we're still waiting for approval on are the capital expenditures that made it onto the ESSER 3 plan. So that we can't move forward with, but all other items we can.
Great, thank you. Pat?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was very, very clear. I have no further questions.
Thanks, Noemi.
I don't have any questions either. It was a good presentation too. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
No, I thank you. I appreciate the clarification around what funds can be used for, and I just I want to clarify remarks that I made at the previous meeting that several people have asked me about, sort of outside of this. So I'm going to say that based on this, and the superintendent's going to correct me if I'm wrong, like my understanding is that we absolutely can use ESSER funds for increased compensation for staff, teachers, paras, others, in the form of stipends and, hazard pay, if you will. And as an aside, I'm going to say that I continue to advocate for that and think that that's a very good use of the ESSER funds that we're getting. Where we are constrained isn't adding that into the base pay, the normal base pay of teachers, and we're constrained on both a regulatory level and in terms of thinking about what our long range plan is for how we're going to support those different levels of compensation and how we're going to, what trade-offs we're going to make, right? Because we see what the ESSER, what those top 3 priorities were. And if we want to add additional staff in these other areas, it seems like we can't do everything as a resource constrained city. Like we can't give stipends and, I guess I won't call them bonuses, but stipends and hazard pay or those forms of compensation for, the incredible work and hardships and stress and extra things that teachers have had to do during this time, and paras and other workers, all the staff in the schools. We can't have that and increases to the base pay within the context of of contracts that are then going to like raise the floor for future raises and so on, and also have extra staff that we're using to, that we're deploying to support all of these other needs that we see around social and emotional learning. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I think that it came across that although I had been advocating for increased compensation, that I was then saying that we couldn't use it for that at all. And that's not the case. And I do think that we should use some of this money in that way so that we can provide some extra compensation for all of our staff who have sacrificed and been so disrupted during this time. Was anything I said wrong? You're factually wrong.
Yep. So just to be clear, you're correct. Yep. The compensation in the form of stipends and in the form of incentives are absolutely permissible.
Okay. And I do advocate for that. Absolutely. So I just want to say that for the record.
Great. Thanks, Jess. And I don't have tons of questions at this point. I guess maybe I would just love to have you all clarify. We're about to start this process, as we do every year, with the schools and the TLTs working, to sort of put forward budget proposals. And, we have, as we typically do, the core budget, Chapter 70 primarily, and then we have the title funds, and then we have these ESSER funds that are, allowed per the uses that you all have laid out here. What can you just help clarify for us then for a school? If I'm a school TLT, what is going to be different about how I'm sort of making requests about what I think our schools need, my school needs for our kids, that is different because of the availability or potential availability of ESSER 2.5 and 3? If you could just paint that at a high level, that'd be great.
For sure. So I think we can anticipate that school planning, teacher leadership teams in the school planning process will advocate for additional resources, both in the form of tangible resources. So that could mean additional materials, for example. That's a very tangible resource for staff that is facing with students. They will also request additional professional learning time, and that will be something we compensate teachers for. So that's in the form of skill building for teachers, capacity building for staff. I anticipate that they'll also ask for additional time for planning, and that will be something we compensate. As an example, we just talked about that being in the form of stipends, for example. And I think there's a host list, but those are things that the ESSER will allow us to do very easily when they come and match goals to some of those needs, and we will use the ESSERs to be able to fund those things.
So that's super helpful. And so those sorts of things are maybe things that are above and beyond what we might be able to typically fund for a school. So TLTs, I'm sure, are hearing the message loud and clear, but make sure that you're putting forward ideas and things that are going to help you all do your work in your schools to support kids even better. And so that, that's great to hear. And then one other question is, I know it emerged as a priority, based on the stakeholder engagement, one of the areas like tutoring programs and support. Can you just talk a little bit about, sort of what's the status, which I assume is more around sort of planning, but like, how is this going to look? If it's a district-wide priority, is this district-wide programs we're going to be rolling out? Are TLTs and schools being asked to make some recommendations in alignment to these priorities, including tutoring? Like, can you just talk a little bit about how the top priorities that were part of the plan, how they're going to actually be reflected in terms of what we see in individual schools and the role of the district versus the school-based teams?
Yeah, Melissa mentioned already that we're going to be hosting Acceleration Academies. That is an example of a district-wide initiative that will be funded via title and accelerations. As she mentioned, we're adding the younger students. That's ESSER funding as one example. We also anticipate that by level, it'll be very different. We'll see the high school hosting additional academic time on Saturdays, which is quite successful for teenagers. And evenings, which is also, really in line with what our oldest learners need. We'll also see quite a bit of differentiation in the summer opportunities, enrichment opportunities, and it will vary in the levels, and so it'll be a combination of that.
Got it. So it sounds like a lot of those programs are district initiated, but then there's also room for, and I'm asking this as a question, in addition to the district initiated acceleration academies, expansion of that summer programs, those things are all great. Are schools themselves also expected or able to, propose things that are in line with these priorities?
That's exactly right. So examples of that at the different levels, the tutoring is a good example of that. What tutoring is for our youngest learners, say grades 1 to 3, will be very different, and that looks very different in middle school and high school, and we're going to honor that. So every single TLT in school matches their goals. They'll propose what that looks like, and then we'll help them fund it.
Great, thank you. All right, thank you. And we'll get to the last item, which is the Leahy School Project Support Letter.
Great, so this last item, we have a copy in your materials. This is just a draft of one that you all supported last time. Apologies if your name is not here. Again, this is just a draft. This is no ill intention here of your name not being here, but we were hoping that you would support a draft, if not just like this, maybe a few tweaks, and that you would say yes to us so that we can more formally make this a document that you all agree on. And this is, again, in support of the Leahy project to the City Council.
Great. So I had a chance to read it, and obviously, there are a couple of edits, minor edits, like myself, and I think Julia's names are not on the letter. But other than that, I felt like the letter captured the fact that this board is what we'd be asked to vote on is supports the Leahy School Project, and it lays out a bit about the MSBA's approval conditional approval of almost $61 million in state funding. So just reiterating that this would be sent to the City Council in their capacity overseeing city funds to continue to work towards a plan where we can use the MSBA funds and city dollars to be able to move forward with this project. Yep.
That's right.
So maybe I will open it up to board members, and in addition to, again, the edits of making sure all our names are on here, is there anything in terms of content that you all would like to see different? If not, and you feel like the content is accurate, I would at any point also entertain a motion to approve us, with the edits of the names, sending this to the City Council on behalf of the LAE. But let me start with alphabet. Do I have a motion, first of all?
I was moving.
Sorry, Jess, go ahead. I was going to go right to you for your first comment,
I just wanted to move.
Okay, so there's a motion.
I wanted to get on it before Pat did.
Okay, so duly noted, Jess made the motion. I think Julia seconded. Any discussion? All right, so hearing none, I'll do a roll call vote to approve that. Jess?
Yes.
Noemi?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Maria?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So that's approved, and again, noted that it's approved with the edits to the names. The rest of the content seemed fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the LTU as well. I mean, I know that you all have been working on the Leahy as well, and your support is really valuable and important, so much appreciated. All right, thank you. And so the last items here relate to minutes of both executive sessions and regular meeting minutes. So I will start first with our last meeting, December 8th, 2021 meeting minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Jess?
Yes.
Noemi?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Maria?
Yes.
Julia?
Abstain.
And the chair votes yes, so those are approved. I'm going to take us to first the executive session, it says executive committee, but executive session minutes of December 3rd, which, is that accurate, December 3rd? I thought we had it right before the last meeting. Is that right, Maria? Yeah, okay, so that should read December 3rd, right? I'm sorry,
8th.
December 8th. That was the meeting we had, the executive session right before this meeting. So I'm going to take that one next because it relates to the December 8th. This is now the executive committee meeting minutes of December 8th, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second. I think
Second.
Maria got in there with that. Any discussion? All right, Jess?
Yes.
Noemi?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Maria?
Yes.
Julia?
Abstain.
And the chair votes yes. And then we're going back now to the executive session minutes for November 10th, 2021. And just to be clear, Maria was waiting on me to get her the votes that we did here as it related to our board's response to the Attorney General complaint on open meetings. So just recorded those votes. So do I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Jess?
Yes.
Noemi?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Maria?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so those are approved. So we are now at the end of our agenda. Just a couple of then reminders to the board is I will be reaching back out to folks who served on the turnaround plan committee and open it up to others as well for this idea that, again, we'll give Jess the credit because I think that's where it started of making sure that we're now looking at the turnaround plan and laying out how we're actually, just the cadence of reporting back to the board and publicly on progress towards the measurable annual goals. So I'll be doing that as well. I will be providing a board an update as well on ongoing conversations with Jonathan Guzman and the Mass Association of School Committees on training and, sort of what that looks like. So I'll update folks on that. And then the final thing I'll just say is Kate Cook, who's been the attorney for the LAE, and she's, the LAE attorney primarily helping us with questions of open meeting law and process bylaws and things like that. So she was just appointed First Assistant Attorney General for Massachusetts. So she's no longer with her firm, which congratulations to her. That's a big honor. But it also means that we're going to be working to appoint a new attorney to support the work of the LAE. So Kate, has been part of a firm that's supporting us, and so has provided some recommendations, and I'll reach out to the board just in terms of a process for us to make that decision in the next month or so. So just a couple of updates there. All right, so at this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All right, Jess?
Yes.
Noemi?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Maria? Yes. Julia?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much. We will see you next month. Our next meeting is Wednesday, February 9th, 2022 here as well. Thank you and good night.